In this podcast, we chat about the defeat to Rotherham, talk about the playoffs, look ahead to Coventry, and answer your podcast questions. This is the Boro Breakdown podcast, and this is all your Boro Matchday chatter in a pod.
Support. Curtis Fleming is there on the edge of the area. Fleming for Craig Hignett. Hit it, Higgy. Higgy hits the treble!
Avenelli coming alive again. Janino wants the ball played to him. Avenelli spots out Emerson!
Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast with Jonny, Dana, and fresh from climbing Mount Killerman, Rotherham, Tom, and welcome to the show. And Middlesbrough have had back-to-back defeats in the last two games. We've secured fourth position, and there's been some injuries mounting up, which is scaring everyone. But guys, how are we feeling about the last week or two? I know we were on Twitter Spaces and had a brief discussion around the Luton game, and we weren't particularly too bothered about that defeat. But I want to know how you're feeling right now after the defeat to Rotherham. So, Dana, how are you feeling in 3 words?
To be honest, eager for playoffs. And I know that's 4 words, but hopefully we can bypass that. It's just that the past. Do we need VAR? Do we need Keith Stroud
No,
in this?
It's fine.
It's
fine.
In this context, playoffs is 1 word, so I think you got there.
Yeah, get VAR. But yeah, just eager for the playoffs, to be honest, because the past 2 games, and you could probably categorise the Coventry game as this as well, they've been dead rubbers. We didn't podcast after the Luton game because I don't think we were asked about it, to be honest. As bad as it sounds, we obviously lost, but we can't go anywhere from here. We are absolutely nailed on for 4th place. We've known our playoff fit for a while, for a couple of games now, so it's not really been... I mean, Carrick won't categorise it as this, but kind of pointless in a way. So I'm just looking forward to having, the injuries hopefully cleared up and those players back, and a game which has something riding on it. Because it just seems like this end to the regular season has been a bit of a dead rubber, to be honest. So roll on the playoffs.
Tom, I mean, fresh. You went all the way to Rotherham. It was a long trip. An hour and a bit, but you made it there and back safe, which is the most important thing. 3 words, how are you feeling?
For me, I had 3 words regarding momentum, but I'm going to say Coventry is key. I think especially if we end up playing them in the playoffs, we can't go into that off the back of a loss at home last game of the season, because it's just going to give them confidence. We need to come back next week, even in a game which has no stakes realistically. We just can't give them that confidence if we end up playing them in the playoffs. So for me, hopefully some of the injuries are back by that game, and we need to come into that strong and be like the Boro we know, really. Because, like I say, as there's no stakes and there hasn't been in the last few games, like there is to an extent in this one for me. So Coventry is key. I will also kind of add that, yesterday I mentioned on the Twitter space that we did kind of feeling guilty about not caring about some of the results, and yesterday was another example of that. It was a 1-0 loss, potentially. Rotherham's becoming like the new Barnsley, where we'll it's a close away day, and then we'll go there and see a bad performance and a 1-0 loss. But like even afterwards, like Rotherham fans all celebrating staying up and stuff, and we were just walking out like, good on them. And then like having a bit of crack with the fans outside, and they're saying they hope we win the playoffs. We're happy with it, and they stayed up, etc. Like, we can't go into this last game with that sort of mindset.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Tom, as well. I think Coventry is a massive game for us as well, just to try and build form again and try and build momentum into the playoffs. And I think my 3 words would be not too concerned. Underlying data would suggest that we've still performed relatively okay over the last couple of games. Not really the end of the world. That we haven't created too many chances against Rotherham, but against Luton we were really good. And both games have kind of had really bad refereeing decisions, which have completely changed the game state of the game. So it is what it is. I think to quote Tony Mowbray. So it is what it is. I'm not too concerned. We're still playing quite well. I thought we played quite well with 10 men yesterday, and we just move on and we go again and look ahead to Monday, which will be all exciting. But let's talk about the Rotherham game then, and we'll start with the team news because McGree, Smith, and McNair all returned to the squad, but Jonny Houston had an injury and dropped out just before kickoff, and there was no Ryan Giles at all following a knock in training. So, Tom, it's a bit of an obvious question, really, but how much is a concern that we're having these injuries at this moment?
It's terrifying, mate, to be honest with you, Johnny. I was glad that we had those 3 players back yesterday, and then it just seems like 2 steps forward, 1 back, because now we're missing Giles and Howson. Hopefully, the issue with Giles isn't serious, and really hoping that top assister in the Championship, or at least he was last time I checked the table. I don't know if he still is, but he's a key part of how we play, and so's Howson. So we desperately need those 2 back. I'd love to have Force Ramsey and Dale Fry back for the playoffs as well. My mate who I went with yesterday was talking about the injuries and speculating, could it just be mind games, because we've not heard any details on many of them, and maybe Carrick's kind of learned that from Fergie. Apparently he used to kind of do something similar, saying so and so's not going to be playing, and then come match day they were in the starting 11. Hopefully it's something like that. I'd love it to be some sort of like big master plan from Carrick and secretly everyone's fit. But how likely that is, I would say it's probably unlikely. But we just need some of these players back for the playoffs. It's the worst possible time of the season to be getting injuries like this.
Yeah. And I agree with you to an extent, Tom. I think Carrick is having some shithousery there, and I think he is masking a few things. You could see a little grin when he's asked about it most of the time. And I think there is some players that we are, who of course are injured, but I think it's not as bad as we think it is anyway. But it'll still be nice to see a full, fresh group come the playoffs if we were able to have that. But for Howson's injury, it creates opportunity for Paddy McNair coming in, and he came in last minute, and of course came in from an injury as well. But how do you think he fared, and playing that midfield role again?
Yeah, I thought he was good because he was in defence, but yeah,
Yeah, so tomato, isn't it?
yeah. I think with Paddy McNair at the moment, there's just this cloud of gloom and doom whenever he's mentioned in the starting 11 or in the team, and I feel like that's really unfair. And yesterday I thought he coped well whenever he was called into action. He did a good job. He didn't let a lot past him. Rotherham didn't have a big threat, it must be said, but I thought when he was called into action he was faultless. When the ball came into the box, he headed it out, and defensively, in terms of his position as well, I thought he was good. So I couldn't really complain about Paddy McNair's performance. I think, as I've said on the podcast before, when we criticise players, I think it's always fair that when they play well, we praise them as well. So yeah, I thought Paddy McNair did fine, considering as well that he was a late introduction or reintroduction to the team. Also considering that he's been injured for the past couple of games, I thought he was faultless. I can't really complain about his performance yesterday.
So, looking into the game in itself, and get your overall assessment, then, and I don't want you to mention Keith Stroud just yet, because I feel like we should come to that in just a moment. But overall performance, Boro-wise, the things that Boro can control, what was your assessment on that?
I thought it was a really poor game to watch. It was a tough spectacle because it was really bitty. It was stop-start. Rotherham had 2 men injured in the first half alone, and the first stoppage, the Ogbene hamstring injury, really stopped any momentum that Boro were building up at that point. I actually thought we started the game pretty decently. McGree was really influential, picking up key positions. I don't think Rotherham could have really dealt with his movement. And it was he who had probably, I would say, the best chance of the game. He dinked the ball over Victor Johansson, and Richard Wood was able to recover his position, having initially been outpaced, and he cleared the ball before it bounced over the line. But then on the other side of the stoppage, we just didn't really recover, and the game suited Rotherham far, far more than it suited us. It was exactly what they probably would have wanted, because Rotherham would be mindful that when Boro get out of first gear, when they're allowed time to just breathe and for the game to have a flow and a rhythm to it, that we can wipe the floor with teams. We've done that time and time again under Michael Carrick. So it was probably a good thing for Rotherham that the game was how it was, because it just suited them. And unfortunately for us, we paid the price for having a man sent off. Haven't mentioned Keith Stroud yet. Haven't mentioned him. But Carrick said that we were better in the second half. I do agree to a certain extent in regards to controlling the game and possession, but we had an inferior threat in front of goal. Our XG in the first half, if I bring it up, was 0.57, and in the second half it was only 0.19. I can only remember two chances. It was one from the Rotherham player, who nearly scored an own goal, and then Tommy Smith's rather wild volley that he should have done better with. So although we were better in the second half in terms of possession, we were far worse in terms of our goal threat, which is going to happen when you have a man sent off. You've got Chuba Pom essentially. He's like playing two roles at once. He's got no one in front of him to link up with, and he's having to drop deep, and he's having to try to play Cameron Archer's role as well. So when you don't have Cameron Archer in the team, you don't have that threat in behind, and Richard Wood is not going to be put under any sort of pressure in regards to his pace because there's nobody there getting him behind. So yeah, it was I'm not mentioning Keith Stroud, but you know what I'm thinking behind all of this. It was difficult for us after that.
Well, I'm going to come to him in just a moment, but obviously there was another key moment in the game which gave Rotherham the win, and it was the goal. Tom, what's your thoughts on it? Do you think Stefan can do a little bit better there?
I will say I've not rewatched it, and from where I was in the stadium, it was one of the first rows of the Boro stand, so I didn't have a great view of it as it was down the other end. I thought quite a few players should have done better with that, coming up to close it down. And yeah, I thought Stefan probably should have dived for that. I don't think there was too much of an excuse not to dive. Potentially maybe being caught out and not expecting the shot, but I still feel like he should have been expecting that. And the whole crowd was yelling, shout and shoot at that point. So obviously that's what was going to happen. So yeah, I think he could have done better. But I also wondered if there was kind of like a bit of what's the right word for it? Just the players not really being asked and like in terms of like getting out and covering it, because there were quite a few occasions yesterday where the ball was in a 50-50 position, and obviously the Rotherham players, they're battling for it. They know that a win's going to keep them up. We looked like, nah, you can have it. We don't want to get injured before the playoffs. So I do wonder if there was an element of that to it. And I also wonder if there's an element of that in taking Cameron Archer off at halftime. Obviously, we did have to take someone off, but he's played every minute of, well, I don't know if it was every minute, but he's played the last few games and started, even when players have been getting rested. So I do wonder if that was a decision made just to kind of keep him as fresh as possible, while also balancing the team.
On that goal as well, by the way, I think it's important to note how we got into that position, because we've mentioned on this podcast before that for a goal, you could probably rewind it a few steps and see exactly what was essentially the first falling domino towards that happening. And Tommy Smith just loses the ball. I think he tries to come inside, he loses the ball, and then who scored it? A Dauphin, I think it was. Yeah, a Dauphin. It's not an arrowed shot right into the top corner with a lot of power behind it. It's sort of in the middle of the goal, sort of. So, yeah, Stefan, it's almost like he was playing pro clubs and his controller batteries ran out. And he couldn't move. It was really weird. But, I think Stefan won't be particularly pleased with himself about that one, because I was thinking, why didn't he actually dive for that?
It looks like from the replay, it does look like Lenihan is in his way, or there's Boro defender in his way, where it just goes round him. I think he sees it late, and obviously it goes in the back of the net, and you're kind of a bit concerned from it. And you're right there, like as soon as someone loses the ball, it creates that domino effect, and you're on the transition, and teams are probably gonna if you're out of position, they're going to get you. So it's a bit of a shame. But I agree with you as well, Tom, around like the players maybe taking the foot off the gas ever so slightly. Confidence is really key in the game when I spoke about that last few weeks. But I think just in case of when you've got something big coming up, you don't want to lose it now. You've worked so hard to get to this position. You don't want to be injured going into such a big opportunity for the club and for yourself. It makes sense just to kind of not go for something that you want to go for. And it's a shame. It's a shame, really, because if you look at a fan perspective, you want Boro to give 110%. You want to win the game, and you want to see a really good performance. Player perspective is we still want to win. We still want to give as much we can in terms of like effort, but also there's an aspect of, well, if something risky is going to happen, do I really want to take that risk at the moment in terms of like tackling, like pulling, like taking an extra sprint when you're feeling a little bit like leggy. So there's little things like that, and I don't think that yesterday is too much of a concern. And yes, I know that the last couple of games haven't been great in terms of creating a hat full of chances, but in terms of what we did at Luton, we were really, really good. Lost to a bad decision. The game yesterday, it was a bad decision. About down to 10 men. I thought we still played quite well with the ball in terms of against Rotherham. So it's not a bad thing. I think if you look at Boro's performance and XG performance, I think we were still overperformed by like 20 plus goals. We still create a hat full of chances. We still created a few chances yesterday with 10 men, like half chances, if anything, but still looked good enough to dominate the game. And it was okay. Could be better. I know it'll be better. I think Coventry will see a completely different Boro side to what we have seen over the last couple of weeks. But I'll let you not mention Keith Stroud, Dana. And there were some really key moments in the game, really. Hayden Hackney probably could have been sent off. Do you think he was fortunate to stay on Hayden Hackney? Because it looked like a bit of a bad one.
Yeah, I honestly thought when I saw the replay back, I was like, oof. It's never nice to see a professional foul like that. Obviously, we probably put it in the umbrella of shithousery, but the intent of that tackle wasn't good to see. I'm not going to lie. And I think it's important to separate the tackle from the injury because Ogbene gets injured after the tackle, so the tackle doesn't cause the injury. However, for me, that's at the most lenient, an orange, the cliched orange card. But if Keith Stroud would have brandished the red, I wouldn't have complained about it, to be honest, as much as it's Keith Stroud. Because I just think he tackles him sort of it's almost like from behind, but more to the side. And he sort of jumps into it a little bit. It's not a good challenge. It isn't. And I feel like he's got a habit of hacking, as Hackney, living up to his name. These little fouls that aren't really needed, and I feel like that was really unnecessary, to be honest. But he didn't get sent off. He probably was fortunate to get away with it, in my opinion.
Hayden Hackney, yeah. Well, that'll catch on. That will absolutely catch on. But obviously, the big moment, really, Dykeseal getting sent off. Tom, what's your views on it? Was it the correct decision?
Well, I've only seen this one from watching it back on Twitter because I was in the queue for the bar at the time.
You've done an Elliot there.
I know he's done an Elliot.
I know. Honestly, I left when there was an injury. I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go and just get a bottle of Coke and we might want a bottle of water.
Oh, well done.
Just
bottle of Coke and a bottle of water.
Everyone was at the bar, buying 6 pints at a time, and it felt like there was only 2 people running the bar at a time. So I missed the remainder of the first half up until the free kick.
For a Coke and a bottle of water.
I know, it's disgraceful. But yeah, I've watched it back on Twitter. Thankfully, we had signal, so I managed to see it at halftime. Not a red card. For me, absolutely not. Lenihan was there covering. And also, despite the fact that it might be a little bit clumsy from Dykeseal, I really feel like Hugo made the most of that. So, yeah, I think it was a shocking decision from Keith Stroud. Probably one to add to the list of people who need to get a job working in the dark. And to be fair, if there was going to be a red card that first half, I wouldn't have complained with the Hayden Hackney challenge. That was just idiotic from Keith Stroud. So, God knows what he's still doing refereeing.
Yeah, John Hugel ought to be ashamed of himself, to be honest. I mean, the way that he just, for me, and this might be with my Boro rose-tinted spectacles on, it was just 6 of one and half a dozen of the other when they both go down. It's like they both drag each other down. Like, obviously, Dyke still initiates a contact. At worst, it's a yellow card. But last man, are you joking? Like, there's an instant in the second half where Lenihan sort of collides. It's very awkward coming together with Georgie Kelly. That's last man, and that's more of a red card than the actual red card. It was absolutely baffling, to be honest. And I never liked the Dickens anyway.
Fair enough then, yeah. Well, now that you've said that, the Dickens shares have just dropped through the floor, Dana, so congratulations for that. But yeah, obviously, I'm assuming you're both disappointed with the red cards, and there was a moment in the game where I think both sets of fans were saying you're not fit to referee, which is quite something if both sets of fans are doing that to you. And I mean, Keith Stroud's got a reputation. Let's be honest, like everyone knows that he wants to make it a little bit about him. It's obvious he makes bad decisions. It happens all the time. I don't think I ever see anything positive about Keith Stroud. If you look on Twitter, on social media, or anything, you get a lot of complaints. And being a referee is very difficult. It can be a very lonely place at times. You make one decision that doesn't go right, but feel like I don't know, just feel like he's just not very good. Sorry to say that, but Tom, what do you think about it as a whole then, in terms of both sets of fans actually saying that about him?
I thought that was hilarious, to be honest. Obviously, being in the stand for that, it looked like afterwards both sets of fans were actually applauding each other, and that wouldn't surprise me because of the whole nature of the game. Both sets of fans were having crack with each other before and after the match, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's been kind of some mutual respect there and applauding each other. But that's honestly what it looked like at the end of singing that. And I just thought, I've never seen that before. But yeah, everyone's come together just to hate on Keith Stroud. It's brilliant.
It's poetic. It's just poetic. But it's rightly so. I mean, look, last 2 games we've had really bad decisions go against us, and it happens in this division. You don't have VAR to go with, but if you got promoted, you do, and even that's still a bit of a farce. So, for some games, so
it wasn't just Keith Stroud either. It was the linesman on the camera side. There were a few questionable offside. Was it offside? Was it onside decisions throughout the game? Because Maddo kept mentioning it on BBC Tees that was offside. Oh, that should have been offside. And then he was laughing when the Rotherham fans were heckling that particular linesman, because he was like, well, even they think that he's been appalling. So I feel sorry for the other linesman who I don't think put a foot wrong during the game. When you've got Keith Stroud and the other linesman, it's not great, is it? And it was just little things like the ball's on the quadrant, not the way Keith Stroud wants it on the quadrant, but we're just going to put it back exactly how it was before, and now it's suddenly okay. And it took him about 4 fouls to book Jamie Lindsay, who committed the most fouls in the game. The way that Keith Stroud was refereeing that football match, honestly, I'm surprised that Jamie Lindsay stayed on the pitch, because he was just a serial fouler in that game. It was just obviously, I don't really want the narrative of this game to become about the referee, because people would be like, oh, well, Boro were poor anyway. But in my opinion, Boro were poor as a direct consequence of having a shit ref. Because you got to think, the Dyke-Steele red card came just before half-time. Boro are statistically much better in the second half than they are in the first. And I am convinced that if we'd have stayed with 11 men, we would have won that game. Because whether we were poor in the first half or not, we would have improved in the second half. I'm almost convinced of it, because it's just what we've seen under Carrick. So, yeah, it's not great, is it?
Well, to add fuel to the fire, there's an article in the Daily Echo from 2016 which says that Keith Stroud is a Luton supporter. So there you go, playing all the conspiracy theories on that one. And there's also something on change.org where QPR fans have signed a petition for him to like not referee them again, which I thought was quite funny. But yeah, he supports Luton of all teams, so should he be refereeing our games? Who knows?
If that's true, then I don't understand that. Like, I don't understand why you would put a Luton fan refereeing a Middlesbrough game. I don't get that. I really don't. Obviously, like, this isn't a shootout between Luton in second and Boro in third, and we've lost the potential of automatics because of Keith Stroud. But still, like, I just don't think that should happen. But maybe there's just not a deep pool of referees because you see the amount of stick they get. But a little bit of transparency, i.e., post-match interviews with them, would alleviate a lot of the pressure that I think they have, because at least we know why they've made that decision. But they don't front up, they don't show themselves. So then we're sat here on this podcast and Tom's saying you should go and work in the dark because you're not good at refereeing. So
well, he can if he wants.
They should be mic'd up like in rugby league for me.
Yeah,
like or rugby in general. They should be mic'd up and have to explain the decisions as they're made if there's any debate over it. Obviously VAR is still contentious because sometimes it does get stuff wrong, but there should be at least some explanation given for those decisions.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. But let's not chat about Keith Stroud anymore because he just does my head in. But I want to talk about the playoffs instead because Boro's momentum has been a little bit meh in the last couple of games since we've kind of confirmed our playoff position. But Dana, what do you think? Is playoffs all about momentum? What do you think?
Yeah, that's branded about quite a lot around this time of the year when you're a playoff team. But I looked into it a little bit. I looked on Soccer Stats, which is a fantastic website, by the way. And in 3 of the last 6 seasons has the most informed playoff team won through the playoff route. The exceptions to that were last season, where Huddersfield were in technically better form than Forest. Over the last 8 games of the regular season, they were averaging 2.38 points per game. Forest, that was Huddersfield. Forest were averaging 2 points per game. Obviously, it was a playoff final between Huddersfield and Forest were the victors there. Then in 2019-20, where the most informed team in the playoff pack were Brentford, who were averaging 2.25 points per game. The eventual playoff winner, Fulham, were averaging just below them 2.13. And then in 2016-17, this was a really interesting season, actually, because technically the most informed team was Sheffield Wednesday, but they didn't even get past the playoff semi-finals. It was Huddersfield, who had got into the top 6 with a minus goal difference, who won the playoffs on penalties after that 0-0 draw against Reading, who were in by far the worst form of any team in that playoff contingent. They were averaging 1.25 points per game over the last 8 games, which is pretty much mid-table form. And, the most informed team, Sheffield Wednesday, as I said there, 2.38 points per game. They didn't even get past the playoff semis. So, I'll repeat, 3 of the last 6 seasons, the most informed playoff team has won the playoffs. And that's going back to 16-17 because Soccer Stats only went back to that season. But yeah, the takeaways that I'd probably take from that, I think momentum and form plays a part, but I don't think it's a necessity. And you've got to think as well, looking at the context of Boro's last 2 defeats, heavily influenced by the officials. I thought we played well against Luton, and I maintain the belief that had Keith Stroud not got his grubby little hands all over that game yesterday against Rotherham, that we would have won that game. So is it important? I don't think it's as important as people make out, but Boro's PPG right now, by the way, over their last 8 games, 1.25, which is not particularly great, but context I think does matter here, and we've sort of faded out this season because there's nothing really to play for anymore in the regular season anyway. So yeah, context here I think is really, really important for me.
Yeah, and Boro only have 2 wins in the last 7. With the points in mind, Tom, is it a bit of a concern that we're not firing from all cylinders? Would you like us to be in that place already?
It is a bit of a concern for me, but as Dan has just said there, the context around the last two games is really key. I also thought we played well against Luton. I thought we were the better team. I thought the better team lost that game, and Luton didn't really kind of give me anything to fear in the playoffs. Now that I've said that, we'll probably get beat off them. But no, that game, I didn't really kind of feel anything after it. You know, it didn't really affect anything, and all I kind of felt was confidence that we can beat them. And yesterday it just seemed like a bit of a nothing game, and you know, Keith Stroud obviously ruined it. Wanted to be the centre of attention, so yeah, like Dana said, context is kind of really key around the last couple of games. But I do wish we'd had a few more wins within that last 8 to kind of carry into the playoffs. For me, big performance against Coventry needed.
Yeah, I'd agree. It'd be huge for us to beat Coventry. I think we probably wouldn't end up playing them. I don't think if we beat them in the playoffs, unless they beat Luton and they go through it that way. But is it a concern? I agree with you both. It's like a minor inconvenience, but for me, also, and this can be quite bold, but I don't think we're the favourites anyway in the playoffs. I think Luton are your favourites. They finished third. That's the merit. You are the third best team in the league on over the 46-game season. You should be favourites to go into that, regardless of whatever you've spent in the summer, whatever your stadium looks like, whatever all this thing is that people are starting to talk about.
Oh God.
Luton are your favourites at this moment in time, and Boro should have no pressure at all going into it. I think where we were a few months ago to now, it's chalk and cheese. You know, like we've came on so much in such a short space of time. Recruitment starting to get there. I remember doing an audio blog / or like a written article around like when Kieran Scott came in, it'll take 2 to 3 years to really bear its fruit. We're only really in that second season. There's going to be another year of a really good, hopefully, recruitment structure and strategy for us to keep building even more. But obviously the teams that come down could be very dangerous again. But from where we are, like we've had a really good season regardless. We're going to playoffs in a good moment. We'll hopefully have players back. I think we'll probably get the better of the team that we play against in the semis, and then that final is a final, and whatever happens whatever happens. So I'm intrigued to see what happens. But are we the favourites? No, like Luton are your favourites. Like whatever you think, like I'm sorry, like your thirds. So like it or not, play the underdog card. You're not, because you are third in the division regardless. So, but who cares? What do I know? So, but let's move on to questions then, because every week you get the chance to send us your question via email at borobreakdown@hotmail.com, Twitter at Boro_breakdown. You can follow us on Facebook as well, the Boro Breakdown podcast, and Instagram Boro Breakdown, and also you can join our Telegram chat with over 300 Boro fans chatting some things about Boro, sometimes not about Boro. We do put some news in there from time to time, and it's just all fun and games. But the first question is from Mike and Luke, and they say, is our away form a problem? Dana Malt, is our away form a problem?
You know what? I'm going to say yeah, a little bit, because you've got to understand that we'll only be at home once in the playoffs, and we've got a maximum there of 3 games, and the other 2 are going to be away from home. Obviously, Wembley's neutral ground, but it's not the Riverside, is it? And to give Carrick credit, he has definitely improved our away form. We were second worst team on the road when he took over. Only Huddersfield had accumulated less points on their travels than us. So he has definitely improved that narrative. However, I am far less confident in Boro on the road than I am at the Riverside. It's like and this is another FIFA mention here, so I apologise, but it's like when you sim in a game on career mode and you're away from home and you just know that you're going to lose because it's away from home. Now, I don't have that exact same feeling. Like I know that Boro, or I feel like Boro are going to lose away from home, but I just don't have the same confidence. I don't know what it is specifically, but it's not been particularly great this season as a whole. But I think it definitely has to be mentioned. Obviously, again, it matters the context, because particularly the last 2 games, we have to mention it again. Played well against Luton, didn't win. Lost because of a really poor decision to award Luton a penalty, which was absolutely not a penalty. And then obviously the Keith Stroud show yesterday. So there's 2 there. You can probably understand why we lost them, but overall it's not been great. But then we have picked up some really good results on the road. Sheffield United and Swansea, and the lovely 3-1s that we seem to like. We can't have everything, can we? And I wouldn't necessarily say that we're poor away from home. It's just that we're not as good at home. And in the playoffs, you're looking at those tiny, tiny, tiny little vulnerabilities that, because of the pressure of the situation, become like heightened and elevated because of that. So potential concern, I would probably say.
Okay, then. And then the next question is from Rob. He says, corners, discuss. Charlie and Andrew have asked similar questions about this one. There's a little stat which I love about corners, is that 97% of corners end in like something that you don't want it to end in. So like you're just not going to create a chance, like goes off for a goal kick, you get counted on. You don't have a good opportunity that happens. So like 97% of the time it's a failure. But as fans, we love a corner. I've never understood it. I think you're statistically more likely to score from a long throw-in, like create a good opportunity from a long throw than you are from a corner, which is all fun and games. But corners, they weren't particularly great, I guess, against Rotherham, Tom, and we haven't really been good at corners all season. I know you're bet, of course, Darren Lenihan to score. That's probably his best chance, but what do you think? How come Boro's corners aren't particularly great?
Because we're not swinging them into the near post and just putting Darrell Lenihan on the near post like I do on FM, and he's my top scorer of the season. So clearly that's all we need to do. But no, I'm not too sure on it, to be honest. It's not like we've got bad delivery or bad players with bad delivery taking them. Ryan Giles, top assister in the league, usually takes our corners, and for whatever reason we can't seem to capitalise on them a lot of the time. Me and my mate were talking about this yesterday, about how we never seem to be good at corners. We never were under Tony Pulis, which was like a big surprise because it's Tony Pulis. We had Aidan Flint. Really, he should have been the first Boro player to win 20 goals since Bernie Slaven in that Tony Pulis season. It shouldn't have been left to Akpom to do. But I think the only time I can remember us being a kind of threat from corners was under Karanka, when we had these sorts of routines from free kicks and corners. And, you can do a short corner, swing it in, Ayala or Gibson's going to nod it in. And we don't seem to be able to do the same thing. It seems either when we're doing the short corners, it seems rushed and people kind of like forget the marks, so to speak, or, swinging it into the box directly from a corner doesn't seem to work that well for us either.
Yeah,
I've got some bits on. Sorry, I've just got some bits on the set pieces, because I always thought, even under Karanka, we weren't particularly good at them, because me and my dad would always, and still do, make a joke of, oh, it was Grant Levitt taking that one. But yeah, it's always been an annoyance, hasn't it? It's not specific criticism to this team. Boro have never been good at set pieces, and I'd like to see a set piece coach just to maybe go down the innovative route rather than the traditional like outswinger and swinger, just a little bit of routine there that's different from the norm. But I will say, I've always held this belief, it's not necessarily needed. I don't think need is the right word, because we are such prevalent goal scorers this season. Again, amazing to say this, it's never gonna like die down for me, but the top scorers in the league, that is worth something. That is weighted, and that means that we don't necessarily need to be good at set pieces. Coventry, who are directly beneath us in the table, likely to be in the playoffs.
Don't say it. Don't.
They're bottom of the table for set pieces. So this narrative that you need to be good at set pieces. I don't know why you're like. I don't know why your head's on your microphone.
It is curse to a T.
Jokeres is defo scoring off a corner.
100% whipping one in, it's off someone's backside and going in. No, thanks to him.
Probably. No, but Blackburn as well were joint bottom until yesterday, where they scored from a corner against Luton. So there's two teams there, one in the playoffs currently and another one in the playoff picture, that haven't necessarily needed playoffs to be, haven't needed set pieces to be in the playoffs. And we're 16th for set piece goals scored this season with 10. So it's not needed. It would just be nice, wouldn't it? It'd be nice to not have this annoying issue of, oh, there we go, the keeper's claimed the ball straight from the corner. That's what annoys me the most. Because, you know, when we get a corner and everyone's uplifted, they're on their feet in the north stand, they're anticipating a goal, I just sit there and I'm like, well, that's not going anywhere. It's no advantage. It's just not. It's how I've been conditioned to react to corners being a Boro fan. They're no advantage. And yesterday we had 11 of them, and our set play XG, this is obviously factoring in the free kicks that we had as well, 0.02 expected goals from set plays, which is like having crisps. Packet of crisps, it's just air, which is just packet of crisps anyway. That's just what Walkers do nowadays. But 0.02 from set play expected goals. Set piece coach, please, would be nice. I mean, we can't have everything, but it would just be nice, wouldn't it? It would just be nice.
I just want to unpack everything that you just said there on like Walker's crisps,
then,
really low XG. So I have one question for you quickly. Who's top of the set piece table?
Goals scored this season? Millwall. They've got 23 goals scored from set pieces.
Set piece. Wow, that's interesting.
That's why I don't want to play them in the playoffs, because yeah, you can say that they don't break teams down, they're beneath them in the table or whatever, but they can do from set pieces, and I just don't think Boro can defend them.
Well, look, like I said, 97% of the time it ends in, not wanting, you're not seeing something that you want to see. It ends in disaster, but 3% of the time it works every time. So we'll move on, but let's look ahead to Monday. And before we get Mark's thoughts from the Sky Blues TV podcast. Tom, do you think we should go into the game full strength or full house as well?
Yes, I definitely think we should try and build some momentum before the playoffs. Going into that, if it is Coventry we end up getting in the playoffs, if they've already played a packed out Riverside and came away with something, they're not really going to fear that so much in the home leg of the playoffs. So I'd like us to go out there and try and prove a point and get that momentum going in. We might not even end up playing them if we do win, but at least we've got that to take into the playoffs.
Okay, then. Well, let's look ahead to Coventry now. And Coventry have had 21 points from the last 12 games. Only 4 teams accumulated more. They're currently on a run of 6 games without defeat. Gyökeres is their top scorer and second top scorer in the league. And both him and the keeper, Ben Wilson, were named in the Championship Team of the Season. But just to find out a little bit more about Coventry, we spoke to Mark from the Sky Blues TV podcast to find out a little bit more.
Hi, this is Mark Smith from Sky Blue Fans TV. Just to give you a bit of insight into Coventry City ahead of Monday week's game at the Riverside Stadium. Formation-wise, we tend to play 3-5-2. We will probably likely play that for the same team as we did in the previous game at Birmingham yesterday. So I expect it to be something along the lines of Wilson in goal, Callum Doyle, Carl McFadden, Luke McNair as the 3 centre halves, Norton Cuffey, sort of a right wing back who sort of plays midfield and also can do the defensive position. Jake Bidwell was probably our best player at yesterday against Birmingham City. I expect him to retain his place. I would imagine it'd be 3 midfielders in Josh Eccles, Liam Kelly, who's deputising for Ben Sheaf, who's been injured, is out for the rest of the season, and obviously Gus Hamer. And then we've got Matty Godden and Big Victor Gyökeres up front. I think players to watch out for, obviously Victor Gyökeres, I think he's second top goal scorer behind Chuba Akpom. But not just his goals, his assists. He's probably one of the best players with his back to goal in the Championship. So I think he certainly cause you a lot of problems, which is probably no surprise. Gus Hamer has been probably our player of the season this year, actually, though, because I think his all-round play, he scores goals, provides assists, and he's a good defensive midfielder, tracks back well. Last season he was pretty poor discipline-wise. He was pretty poor, but this season he's improved that side of the game. and he's been absolutely fantastic. So both in defence and attack. So I think they're the two key players. But I think in terms of the game itself, yes, it's. We just need 1 point from this game to cement ourselves in the playoffs. But we're under no illusions. It's going to be a difficult game. Boro have done excellently since Michael Carricker's taken over. I'm quite glad that we played Boro at the time when Wilder was manager. So, but we know it's going to be a tough game. Boro have been brilliant this season. So I'm just hoping that we can get that draw. I think a win's going to be tough because Boro are very, very strong at home. But I think we can get a draw from this game. I think we can get 1-1. And that hopefully will get us in the playoffs. So let's see what happens. Play up Sky, please.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. So predictions, guys. Obviously, it's the last game of the season. Hopefully, it's a hot, sunny day in your retro shirt. But Tom, what is your prediction for Boro's game against Coventry?
I want to be optimistic and say 3-0. Like I say, we need to pick up some momentum. We're good at home. We should be seeing the season out with a bit of style.
Okay, then 3. I love optimistic, Tom. Like optimistic. It's great. Dana, what are you going to go for?
Can we not just throw the game so Sunderland don't get in the top 6, please? No. Akpom's a goal off 30 in the league. So in regards to, how we set up, I think you go full strength. Certainly with Akpom up front anyway, because that's a big feat for him and for this football club to have a 30-goal a season striker. So, yeah, I'm going to go with... let's be honest, Gyökeres is scoring, isn't he? So we'll get that out of the way first. 2-1 to Boro.
2-1. I'm going to go 2-0. We all go home happy. And I think Coventry is still in the playoffs if they get beat, right? I think there's a lot of things that have to go against them for them to not to get in. So I think they'll probably do it anyway. But we'll soon find out. But Boro suffer back-to-back defeats against Luton and Rotherham. But can they see a blue sky ahead against Coventry? This has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was a Boro Matchday Chatter in a pod. Up the Boro Breakdown.